Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome back to Rock and Roll Religion, where we've got a little bit of an interesting topic for you today. Where it's not a super famous band; they've always been around in the background, but they've never really catapulted into the top tier of artists. That being said, a number of people have covered their material and elevated it to that status. And we are talking about a band from the UK called Diamond Head, part of the new wave of British heavy metal coming in the late 70s. And here to help me do that, we have a guy who has been following him for a long time, Mr. That 70s Rock Fan. How's it going, buddy?
Well, it's going very well. Good afternoon, mate. It's great to be here, and this is right up my alley, as the actress said to the bishop.
Yeah, right.
Because not only was I around and heavily into the new wave of British heavy metal, but this is a band that I actually lived for a few years near the town that they came from, so got to see them quite a bit in the late 70s, early 80s in various venues. So quite, great choice.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised it's taken me this long to get to them because I've been listening to them for years and years now. I think I discovered them about 5-6 years ago, and then their recent stuff has been absolutely killer.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit behind on listening to some of that because of time constraints, but I've been trying to dip into it in the last couple of days, and yeah, they're really sounding pretty good, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal bands that are still around sound really good in the new era. I don't know if it's the better production compared to what they started with, or they've got new band members, or just rediscovered that fire. But a lot of those bands are just producing, career material in the modern era.
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, I think obviously the best will always survive, and you take that experience of writing and playing live, all those years of playing live and being in the studio, and if they've got any modicum of talent, which these guys have, it will always result in something satisfying. I mean, good is always good. And I think you're right. Maybe there's the addition of certain modern production and more modern production, and certainly in Saxon's case, they're still making some really good sounding records. These guys too they've obviously got what it takes, and that translates to the modern era, whereas many others don't, of course.
And it's interesting that these guys took so long to get started, given that their obvious talent level. Nobody wanted to sign them for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's weird. They were seen, even on that scene, as almost like a minor player. They weren't on a level of Maiden, or so they weren't seen as being at the level of an Iron Maiden or even a Saxon. And yet, I think their influence might almost be larger in some ways.
Certainly in terms of bands that they've inspired, absolutely. They are up there with, one of the biggest metal bands of all time, Metallica, being a huge fan of these guys. And it's interesting that they've been around since 76, and they even apparently paid to record their first album, Lightning to the Nations, in 79 without a label.
And that's when you could see them in club gigs at that time in the, I'll call it the Birmingham area. It wasn't really Birmingham. They were from Stourbridge. They were closer to Wolverhampton in some ways. They were regulars in pubs and clubs playing in the late 70s, even right up to 1980, 81. You could see them without having to go to a huge venue,
And even though the album's fantastic, I love almost everything on the record, nobody wanted it, and nobody really paid any attention to them. None of the labels came to them and asked them for a deal or anything like that. And they kind of stayed in the underground until 82, when they finally got on a minor label.
Yeah. So 1982, that would be Borrowed Time.
Yep.
era. Yeah, I can't remember the label, of course.
I don't remember the label either. I think they were some minor no name.
Yeah, that was their second album, if I recall rightly. After
Yeah,
Lightning
they
to the
had
Nations.
Lightning to the Nations, and that saw very limited distribution and is incredibly rare to find to this day. So if you guys actually find a copy of the original, Lightning to the Nations LP, hold on to that shit because it's going to be worth money.
I know, and I wish at the time I'd bought a copy at some of the gigs where they were selling them.
Right?
I didn't, of course, because I was cheap and hard up, and so I just recorded everything on the cassette. So somebody else had a copy, and I taped it.
Yeah, right. It's one of those. I can buy this record, or I can have another beer.
Or I could have another beer, or I can go to the gig.
Yeah, right.
Can't do both.
Yeah, we've both been in that position where like I have enough money to go to the show, and that's about it.
That's it.
And
Yeah,
probably
and
buy a shirt.
couple of beers and maybe a pin or a shirt or something. But
Right. No, other than that, that's pretty much all I'm going to do. But no, that was the position these guys were in for a long, long time, and it's kind of surprising given the obvious quality of their music. How anyone could kind of hear them live or in their demo recordings and just go, nah, we're not interested.
I don't get it because there was many lesser bands, rose to more prominence for a year or two in that era and then faded. But if you listen to Lightning to the Nations, you've got this brilliant guitar playing, very individual style of Tatler.
Oh yeah,
and then this brilliant powerful vocal style of Sean Harris. I mean, those two alone could have been in any band. Those guys have been huge.
Oh yeah, you could plug one of those guys into Saxon or Iron Maiden and have them work very well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But it's interesting that like you say, like there were bands out there that were not really all that good that achieved like international superstardom. Meanwhile, bands like this and Grim Reaper got basically pushed to the sidelines and barely noticed.
Yeah, it always did strike me as a little bit weird, that they were one of the more overlooked guys. But then, of course, as you know, and you mentioned, their legacy is probably bigger than almost every band of that era because of their influence on the black metal, the Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax.
Yeah, the thrash scene. But I mean, I brought them up this week because, well, it's the week before Halloween, and these guys have a very strong horror theme running through the band.
Yeah,
especially lyrically with songs like "Am I Evil?"
Yeah, and that is just such a phenomenal song. I mean, even if they'd never done anything else, that track alone would make them immortal in metal terms, I think.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, that's one of those classics that no matter who's playing it, it sounds good.
Yeah.
And I love the intro to it too. Like, not every band can basically straight up rip off a piece of classical music and stick it on the front of their song and make it work.
Yeah, and often that comes across as pretentious, of course, but in this case, it just fitted the mood perfectly.
Well, especially with the tone they had on those guitars, just that bone crunching, dark tone with this dooming march of the Mars Suite in the back, going forward. It was just beautiful.
Oh, great choice, yeah, fantastic choice, very doomy. Yeah, I love it. It's and even at the time though, I remember you thinking, what a great record, but it wasn't like everybody else was talking about it.
Yeah,
that song.
It kind of seems to like almost like they were ahead of their time in a lot of ways, where now everybody loves it, but like back then everyone's like, nobody heard it.
Exactly. It was like, well, that's okay. And then
like, yeah, they're all right. And then moved on to the next band.
Yeah, then they moved on. It was always really, it's like they were fighting an uphill battle against something, and I don't know what it was. But
I don't know what deals they were offered. Because I was reading a little bit of their bio, and it looks like they turned down a couple of record offers. But I think that's probably because of the terms of the deal.
Oh, I would think so. I mean, there's probably some really shitty deals
Oh
at
yeah,
the time.
I mean back then that was common practice to have some real Faustian bargains made in order to get a record.
Faustian's a good way of putting it. It's a Faustian record as well, of
Oh
course.
yeah, well I mean that's what happened to Grim Reaper is that they were like 4 albums into their career and got in a fight with their label and wanted out,
Hmm,
only to find out that their label owned the name Grim Reaper.
that's right. And in fact, some probably own their souls, their eternal souls too.
Probably.
But yeah, Am I Evil? It's a great. I mean, there's Shakespearean s- elements to it. I mean, lyrically, I think it just
Oh
it's
yeah.
a fantastic poetic lyric. This tortured soul and moral dilemmas. I mean, apparently there's some real life experiences in there. I don't know
Yeah, I mean,
quite what.
I don't know the story with the band behind the song, but god damn, did they describe it well and have some really interesting lyrics in there.
Yeah, that struggle of between good and evil
Yep.
in the individual is extremely well done. But I mean, on top of that, you've got this fantastic, powerful riffs going on.
Oh yeah, and it's fairly easy to play too.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a bit of
it's
a
not that difficult to learn, and it sounds amazing.
yeah. It's a riff, or some of the riffs are a lot of guitarists try them because it's like a Stairway to Heaven thing. I think
Well, yeah, I mean, it's you have to try to play it.
I think Am I Evil is one of those. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have a bash at this.
Yep, and it's a fairly easy one to pick up, just like a lot of Sabbath's early stuff, where it's an amazing sounding riff, but it's deceptively simple.
Yeah. How would you compare, in your opinion, the Metallica cover with the original?
The Metallica version is excellent. Like, it certainly has better production than the one on Lightning to the Nations,
Hmm.
because it was recorded at a much higher budget, like 5 years later, and there'd been a huge jump in audio quality in that time, from the late '70s to the early '80s.
Yeah, I think that's probably the difference. I mean, obviously, there's a different vocal style
Yeah, and I think I
too.
prefer the original's vocal style. I do appreciate the musicianship in Metallica's version, though.
Oh, I think so. I think they did a superb version. And I think it ironically brought them to a wider audience than they might
Yeah,
otherwise have
because
expected to have.
it's not on the albums anymore, but on the initial release of the Kill 'Em All LP, there was a cover of "Am I Evil" on there,
Hmm.
and I think that catapulted that song anyway right into into the spotlight, which I kind of
Yeah.
feel is unfair because it's a cover and no one knows the original.
That's right. Because then people think, well, that's their song. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, so many people I've talked to about this were like, "Wait, what do you mean that's a cover?" Like, yeah, no, that's a Diamond Head song, and they're like, "Who the hell is Diamond Head?"
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I think a lot of their material in their earlier Diamond, the first album particularly, was a huge influence on their contemporaries, in
Yeah.
my opinion. I mean, Maiden took an awful lot of stuff from Diamond Head, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can hear it on their first couple of records, especially a lot of like the more occult themes and
Hmm.
style with that. And also, a lot of bands took those like songs like "Am I Evil," those big, heavy, epic riffs, and just ran with that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was something that was kind of unique to them at the time. And it's not, and I love the first album too because it shows their range. They're not just the heavy doom band or stuff like that. They have like more heavy blues stuff, like it's electric. Um,
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it's pretty much just a straight, really heavy rock and roll tune.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely influenced by the era they were in because
Oh yeah,
they were into the blues rock stuff of the early 70s, and the early metal stuff still had a lot of blues rock influence. So they weren't exactly, yeah, they weren't completely unmoored from that influence, but they certainly put. I think they did their own thing as well. It was like Lightning to the Nations.
Yep.
it does contain a very definite Diamond Head sound,
Yeah,
even
they
with
don't
those
sound like
influences.
anyone else, which is more than I can say for a lot of bands from this period.
They don't, and I mean, if you listen to the Prince, that's another fantastic track. I
Yep.
always remember
The title
fondly.
track off of Lightning to the Nations is pretty damn good too.
Yeah,
And they're all different songs too. They're not the same real feel to them. They're all very different.
yeah, and they're going for that great lyrical style, talking about big, big themes, big topics, temptation,
Yeah,
the
they're
desire
going
for
for the big
riches.
stuff. They weren't like, the let's go have fun and have a couple of beers band. They were about the big thing stuff.
Yeah, and yet not losing sight of the fact it was rock and roll.
Yeah, so like they're fun songs with a really heavy message behind them. And I really dig that. And
Yeah.
well, good to see you, Christian. And I mean, in top 10 metal bands, I don't think they're in the top 50.
Yeah, it's
band.
difficult to say. I mean, I'd certainly think that for me, they're in the top 50. Yes, for me. But then that's my era. I'd say
Yeah,
they're
true.
probably closer to the top for me than perhaps for yourself, a young lad like yourself. Because I'm not as up in some of the modern stuff. I don't know, top 10. Yeah, probably wouldn't put them in the top 10. But that's just a personal thing. I bet there are a few people out there who they are their favorite band.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put them in my top 50, but that's not exactly an insult considering I have hundreds of playlists on Spotify by band.
Exactly. I think I would say that they're
in like the top third.
They're an important, not a footnote. They're an important sidebar in metal.
Yeah, they're one of those band acts that's never been in the spotlight, but they're always right there in the wings. And everyone who's around the scene knows who they are.
Yeah, I think they're, for those who are into the music, they're a band that they should definitely listen to.
Absolutely. And in terms of like where they're at in like in terms of popularity and fame, like they're right there with bands like, like Grim Reaper or Tigers of Pantang or something like that.
Yeah, there's a band that I think, they got a lot of attention at the time, more than Diamond Head, I would say. And
they've kind of faded over the years because they haven't been around constantly. Neither is Diamond Head.
I don't think they're as good.
They have their moments.
Yeah.
And they have some really good albums, but yeah, I don't think they're as talented as these guys are.
So I'm trying to think of the other songs Metallica did. Helpless was one of them.
Yep.
I'm sure they did a couple of other ones.
They covered the Prince.
The Prince.
And they also covered It's Electric.
They did It's Electric, that's right. Yeah, on Garage Inc.
So they have like 4 major Diamond Head songs as covered.
Yeah. I mean, I think Brian Tatler was, and they still perform them from time to time, I think.
Yeah, well, they're still around as a band, I think, and they're releasing newer records.
But I think Metallica still perform those.
They still do at least Am I Evil live. I know that for a fact.
And I think
that's been a staple right along.
I think Tatler's quite grateful because obviously that provides income for the band.
Well, not only for royalties, but I guarantee that the guys from Metallica are pointing people to the band like, "Hey, this is the original. Go listen to that."
Yeah, but obviously Diamond Head live are still doing all 4 of those songs. But it said the Metallica one does keep them. It kept the wolf from the door.
And in more recent days, Diamond Head themselves have actually re-recorded "Lightning to the Nations" in 2020. With they recorded every song on the first album, and they also did a couple of covers, including a version of "Sinner" by Judas Priest that sounds fantastic.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
And I think their 2 major covers on there are "Sinner" and "The Immigrant Song" by Led Zeppelin. They do a really heavy version of that.
Oh God, to see that's just one of my favorite songs of all time.
Oh yeah, it's just a solid, headbanging track.
There's nothing like that opening riff. It's just so good. And then
I still love where the inspiration for that came. They were riding a train, and I got the rhythm from there.
All right. Well, I can hear that. Yeah, I can hear that.
It's one of those things that, like, until someone says it, you'll never notice it. But as soon as it's there, it's just like, wait, shit. Yeah,
Mm,
they're right.
yeah, it just makes sense now when you think it chugs along.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, Brian
Um,
Tatler said that the Metallica royalties are enough for him to live off, so he doesn't have to worry about that. He can do what he wants
yeah, and that's
without
an
worrying
interesting
about it.
position for a band to be in,
Yeah.
where you don't have to, worry about the next record or the next tour and stuff like that, and you can just do what you
What
want.
a relief. Yeah. Yeah.
It just takes so much pressure off of you to be that, band like a Sabaton or a Motorhead that's just cranking out material year after year, because it burns you out after a while.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's great to be able to. It's like I remember Noddy Holder of Slade, who lived not far from Diamond Head in that area, said about the Christmas single they had, "Merry Christmas, Everybody." That was a huge hit in Britain and continues to be the most favourite Christmas song ever. He says, "That's me pension plan."
Yeah, right.
He doesn't have to worry.
You do that one song that gets on the radio in
He doesn't have
perpetuity.
to worry about anything. It's his pension plan. It's always going to be there.
Uh,
Yeah. So
and
what?
let's face it, that's your reward for coming up with a song like that that turns into, part of the culture
That's
at
right.
large.
It's built into the culture of a nation. But so yeah, I think though for me, the album that remains most interesting is Canterbury,
Yeah, that was
the
a
third
different
one.
album for them.
Oh yeah,
And this is what I like about Diamond Head is, like I said earlier, they're not, a one note kind of band like where they do this specific type of song really well. They're musically all over the place. Like they can do a ton of different styles and make it sound good. And Canterbury is kind of an evidence of them evolving a little more than that into
oh
a more
definitely.
almost prog rock direction.
I mean, at the time, I thought this is yeah. I mean, even the title and the cover, this is progressive.
Yeah, and that was weird to hear out of a metal band in the early '80s.
Yeah, especially given the previous two albums have been pretty good metal. They were like, and it's not that it's not a metal album, but it's just got this kind of well, I like the history aspect of it. Of course, it's
Yeah,
about history. Some of it. I mean, it's not
and of course,
all.
anytime you mention, you write songs about history on this channel, yeah, you're going to gain
Yeah.
points right there.
Can I? Sorry, mate. I'm just going to have to drop out for 5 seconds.
Yeah, no
Hang on.
worries. But no, I mean, this band is prolific in terms of their own catalog, and they show up an awful lot in other people's either bios or discographies throughout the years, and they've been on and off. They kind of broke up in the mid '80s, and then got back together in the '90s, and then that fell apart because it was the '90s and it was metal. We go through that all the time on this channel. And then they seem to have figured it out in 2000 because they've been together ever since after reforming in 2000 with a new singer and a couple of new band members around Tadler. And they've been going strong ever since. And I would heavily recommend, like I said, the Lightning to the Nations 2020, which is a re-recording of their original material. And I would heavily recommend their latest studio album, Coffin Train, which has some excellent heavy and speed metal stuff on it. Songs like Belly of the Beast and stuff like that. Brilliant, brilliant work. But they are, like we've been saying, one of those bands that's never right in, like, they're at the top of the B tier, I would say. They're not that famous, but everybody who knows them knows them. So they're one of those bands, and they've been pretty solid in terms of quality throughout. There's never been like a huge, one of those albums that, like, wow, that sucks, I can't believe they made that, yada yada. Apparently a lot of people didn't like Canterbury because of how progressive it was, but I actually dig a lot. Well, I dig a lot of prog rock, like Rush and that kind of stuff anyway. So that was kind of right up my alley of, oh, they're actually doing some, progressive stuff musically with this. That's interesting. And Bobin, hey man, that's why we do this show, is try to shine spotlights on bands like this that have been around for a while and maybe don't get some of the attention they deserve. And I think that's a shame, especially with the younger bands, because I would hate for a talented young band to, you know, kind of languish in obscurity when I think they have what it takes to be like the next generation of metal all stars. Currently it's the NWOTHM movement of bands like Ambush and Enforcer and all these guys coming out of Sweden, Sweden. I know a couple from Canada that are really good. Mostly Sweden and Finland.
Sorry about
Scandinavians
that,
have a
mate.
thing with metal, apparently.
Had to take a call.
Okay.
All right, where are we?
Well, it's just Bovin was just saying he's definitely going to listen to him more, and that's why we do this show, is to kind of shine a spotlight on bands that kind of go underappreciated.
Yeah, and I mean they've got quite a few albums and some latter day ones, but if you listen to the first 3 albums, you'll get a really good spread of stuff.
Yeah, and they kind of. It's funny that the band didn't stay very consistent over the years. They've had constant lineup changes. They've basically gone away several times, but their music has always stayed very consistent.
Yeah, I think, is it really only Brian Tatler that's the original member left? I think
so. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty
there
sure.
There may be one other one, but I don't know if he's been there the whole time or if he came back.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been hugely familiar with all the individual members. I know it's a different vocalist currently, but the first 3 albums I look back on very fondly because I did listen to them a lot at the time. And Canterbury shows a great progression from the first 2. There's still some of the same elements, but it's very melodic, it's got those progressive elements to it. It's not just, heavy riffing, although there are heavy riffs on the album. Melodic and emotional, I think, are the words they would use.
Yeah, I mean, people who are more familiar with bands like Rush or Tesla, I think, will get this record.
That's a great comparison, actually, my friend. I like that comparison. I think obviously Rush are Rush, but I think
they're just their own.
But I think I can see some Rush influence in the album Canterbury, particularly.
Yeah.
In there, there's bits of that, and Tesla's a great comparison too. Yeah, so it's metal, and there's some pretty hard metal on it, but it's also very melodic and intricate. A lot of complex lyrics. And some anthemic moments too, and it's not all noodly. So,
yeah, I mean, and that's something that prog rock has been known for decades. Is like you get some interesting stuff musically, but you do have those epic, sections of songs that everybody just kind of sits back and just in awe.
Well, I think One More Night on Canterbury is a track that always sticks out in my mind as being
that's a good one.
Beautiful record, yeah. But it's showed an album, much more mature band than people would give them credit for, given they didn't have a lot of commercial success.
So yeah, and at this point in time, metal was kind of seen as like the have fun, guy in a bar kind of music, not anything more high proud than that.
Guy in a bar and gynecologist, perhaps. But
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think metal was still seen by many people as the bludgeoning people over the head type thing, which we all love, of course.
Seems an odd fit for this kind of lyricism and messaging.
Yeah, and for a band that was on the fringes of commercial success or public recognition like this, to come out with such a mature 3rd album was quite stunning, I think,
Yeah, and that was kind of something they had from the start. Like that wasn't something like, they switched to in the 80s. Like they were always that way.
That's right. I mean, I think they may have been a little bit ahead of people like Iron Maiden in that respect. That's just my controversial opinion.
Yeah, it's like, and somebody, and somebody's obviously got to be first.
Yeah, I mean, I like Maiden. I've always liked Maiden, but I almost have a sneaking feeling that Diamond Head could and should have been bigger, perhaps. But
I
that's
think
just
if
been.
they'd gotten the attention that they probably deserved, they would have been just as big,
I think so.
at least for a time. I don't know if they would have had the staying power of Maiden,
Mm,
mainly due to the instability in their lineup.
yeah, that's an issue for sure.
Because that's one of Maiden's superpowers is that they've basically never changed bandmates for long.
Yeah, unless they were forced to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unless they were forced out or, like in the case of Bruce Dickinson, leaving for personal reasons and then coming back.
yeah. Because I remember Maiden with Paul Di'Anno.
Yeah, and
I saw them live with him.
and a lot of people like get a very visceral reaction to Paul Di'Anno's voice, and I don't get it. I love him.
I think it's great. I mean, he's nowhere near as controlled as Dickinson, but he's. Some people would say that's the true Maiden.
Well, and when you look at the number of just sheer classics that are on those first two records,
Mm.
like it's kind of hard to argue with. Like, songs like Killers, Wrathchild,
Oh yeah,
Phantom of the Opera.
that's kick-ass stuff.
Yeah, it's like he certainly was no slouch in the vocal department.
No, not at all. No, I don't think he's got quite the range of Dickinson, but it was his. He was great. He was. I mean, at the time, when the change happened at the time, those of us that were into metal and rock were like, "Oh, really?"
Yeah, it's like, who's the Bruce
Yeah,
Dickinson kid?
because Dickinson, I'd seen Dickinson with Samson.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if you'd been around the scene, you'd know who he
Yeah,
was.
and
But
it was like,
most people were just looking at the album was like, who is this
"Yeah,
Bruce
that's
Dickinson
right.
kid?
Really? Deanne was out and this guy's coming in." Of course, it was great after that, but
Well, yeah, for a while anyway.
for a while.
And
But I think
remember,
Diamond Head should have been bigger. I think it's one
yeah,
of these bands that were they never got their due, I don't think.
yeah, I think they've constantly gone underappreciated by the industry, especially. I think that's, I think that's
Mm.
what's kind of held them back all along. Is it's certainly not a lack of talent, or a lack of ideas. It's basically people not giving them a chance.
Yeah, I mean, you get normies, if I could put it that way, people who have no real knowledge of metal beyond the surface, all know who Iron Maiden are.
Yeah,
I know people go to see Iron Maiden because it's Iron Maiden. Well, how many albums have you got? Well, I got one, maybe, or they've heard 3 songs or whatever.
yeah,
Run to the Hills. You know, and they go because it's an event.
yeah.
But if you asked them who Diamond Head were, they'd go, "Hey, what?"
Yeah, I mean, well, Metallica is the same way. Where hell, they even cover a lot of Diamond Head stuff, and they're one of those bands that transcended the scene and into mainstream culture.
Yes, certain bands do, regardless of the content of the music, and they become as we say, I mean, maybe the normies is a pejorative word, but normies know who they are. The
Yeah,
same people who know who Taylor Swift are will also know who Iron Maiden are.
yeah, like they're definitely one of those bands or Metallica is one of those bands that everybody has heard at least one Metallica song in their life. They may not have known it, but they have,
because they became pop chart successes.
Yeah, and what was amazing is they were doing that in the late '80s, playing thrash metal.
Yeah, you got to hand it to them.
Nuts.
You have to hand it to them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that was nuts that you became the biggest band on earth playing a genre that's not very large.
That's right. I mean, at a time when people like Madonna and Prince and others were still huge,
Well, and
in the pop world.
They were competing with, mainstream rock bands like AC/DC.
Yes.
In terms of popularity, and that's insane coming from an underground genre.
It is really quite interesting. It is amazing that happened, and I remember being fairly astounded by it at the time, thinking, "Really, this is selling millions?" Not because I didn't like it. I was like, other people are liking this.
Yeah.
Like, really? Because it was the underground thing of its time when these bands started.
Yeah, I mean,
The
the
thrash
early
bands.
80s was like the underground thrash metal era of like nobody's heard of these guys yet, and it's still kind of looked down on even by other metalheads. Where,
Yeah.
nowadays everybody knows the Big Four.
Well, indeed, and I mean, I guess they all had something which made them big, but Metallica of all of them are the biggest.
Oh yeah, I mean they're head and shoulders above everybody else. In terms of name recognition, I would say Slayer's probably number 2, maybe Megadeth.
Yeah, that one's a tough one to say. I mean, I think the name Slayer is better known.
Yeah, in terms
Whether
of like
people
just
know their,
people have
whether,
heard of it, I think
yeah,
Slayer.
whether people know the records or not, it's a different matter. But
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I guarantee most people who know the name Slayer have probably never heard one of their records.
see, they had their hits. It's
true.
It's true. They had their hits, but yeah, they're not. But I guess in any genre, only a handful of bands get that mass market recognition in
Yeah.
any genre. And
Man, Iron
Metallica are
Maiden
one of
certainly
them.
one. Judas Priest would be another.
Maiden and in fact, if anything, Iron Maiden are probably more accessible to normies than Priest.
Yeah, I would say that, where they have a little bit more of a mellow tone to them than the height of Priests. They're a little easier to get into.
I'd say so. I mean, it's not a negative, of course, but yeah, it's just there's people I know that have no interest in metal of any kind or even hard rock, and they've gone to see Iron Maiden.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Really?
And
Well,
yeah,
it's Iron
but
Maiden.
the name did contribute to their mainstream jump, where it's Metallica.
Yeah.
Okay, it's easy to remember. It's fairly descriptive of the band, or it was when they created it.
Mm.
And no, I think that did have a lot to do with it. Now, I wish more people had heard of the Big Eight rather than just the Big Four, because honestly,
Well,
I'm not so sure I
Testament,
wouldn't
yeah.
put Exodus or Testament above Anthrax.
I actually think Testament are probably more influential.
More influential, certainly, but I think they
Yes.
might be better than Anthrax are.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. Yeah, I could support that.
And
For
that's one of
sure.
the reasons we like the Big Eight are not like a definitive list, nor are they in order. Like,
No, and they
'cause-
all were fluid between members
Yeah,
switched between many of them.
yeah, depending on your own personal opinion, certain bands can be in different slots, or some may not even be on the list at all.
I'm not sure. It would be quite hilarious if Testament had become as big as Metallica.
That would have been funny because I mean, early Testament sounds a lot like fairly early Metallica
Yeah,
at the time.
yeah. I think it's a little bit on the more visceral side, Testament, if that's the right
Yeah.
word.
Which is why which is why later on they kind of veered into death metal a little bit. Not
Yes.
well received, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the direction they were going.
They went into half dead metal.
Yeah, right.
Stunned unconscious metal. No,
And unlike Metallica, they actually took the reaction from their fans and went, "Oh, okay, that's not what they want from us," and went back.
And went back, yeah.
Instead of like, "Nope, well, this is just who we are now. Deal with it."
But yeah, Diamond Head, I think, it's clear they heavily influenced that scene.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was also a gold mine of unheard songs.
Yeah, if you're looking for an older band to get into that you've never really listened to before, check out these guys' discographies. You'll probably find a fair bit that you
go,
are.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that before.
Either that you've heard before or you never heard and really just dig into, because they're one of those bands that the deeper you go into their track listings, the better it gets.
Oh yeah, and I'm really going to have to start listening to some of the later stuff. I mean, I've got a digital copy of The Coffin Train.
That album is excellent.
I think I've listened to it like twice, and since it came out, so I nearly need to get back into it. because that's one of the later ones. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
There's a bunch in the middle I didn't necessarily.
Yeah, I
can't
think their
recall.
latest is their re-recording of Lightning to the Nations, which I would heavily recommend everyone listen to.
Okay, I haven't heard that yet. No.
It sounds phenomenal. The version of Am I Evil on that one is heavy as hell.
Right, I'm going to have to get a hold of that then. Yeah, for sure.
And their new singer does a very good job with it.
Yeah, I think he's a Danish guy. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Anderson something?
As Anderson Rasmus something or other. Oh god.
Oh,
what's his name?
yeah, something like
Is
that.
it Raz? No, I think you're right. Anderson something. What the hell's his name? I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, I'd have to look that up too, because Scandinavian names. It's just like Jørgensen von Bergensen.
Vergen, der Dalen. Yeah. So I mean, after the Coffin Train, was that when they did Lightning to the Nations again?
Yeah, they did that in 2020.
2020.
So that would have been the year after Coffin Train.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they've done anything since. I haven't heard anything newer from them.
Well, this is it. I can't think of anything.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't any, because, again, like you say, they're one of these bands that I forget about a fair bit.
Me too. It's really weird. It's a shame. It's a total shame. I should be more into them, but I mean, there's only so little time. Rasmus Born Anderson. I just looked him up.
Okay.
And Born B-O-R-N.
They're one of those bands that kind of gets lost in the archives a little bit.
Yeah, Rasmus Baum Anderson. Sorry. But Tatler, I think, is the only original there.
Yeah, I think he's the only one that's been there all along.
Yeah, Rasmus Born or Baum, B-O-M. But yeah, I think Coffin Train might have been the last fully original album.
Yeah, they've done a bunch of cover albums.
Yeah.
Which is always interesting. I mean, Saxon's last two cover albums have both been fantastic.
I love those.
Motorhead's Undercover was excellent too.
Yeah, I do love the Saxon ones because actually they do something different with the tracks.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate. They don't just do straight covers. They actually tweak them a bit, which only guys who really know what they're doing can do, of course. Got to have a lot of confidence.
And Soul Assassin. But 70s brought that up earlier with, Brian basically saying that the royalties for Am I Evil alone are basically...
He's keeping Brian Tatler in a house and food.
Yep. He said, now he's set.
Yeah, exactly. He said, now it's great because I can do what I want. Musically, I don't have to worry about the baseline. It's there. I've got the baseline income from those covers. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of covers of that one.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's almost a rite of passage at this point in the metal community is to do a cover of Am I Evil.
I think I don't know, did they ever do a response? They should have done a response song, Yes, I Am, or No, I'm Not. It should have been called. That would answer the question.
That would have been excellent, like a two-parter.
Yeah. One where he goes into the evil character and one where he goes away from it. Yeah.
Ooh. Or even better, a kind of a 3-track combo of Yes, I Am or No, I'm Not.
Yeah.
And basically you get to the arguments for and against. That would have been interesting.
It would have been, but
that's a little high concept even for
it is. But I'm going to have to listen to the remake or the re-recorded Lightning to the Nations, and I'm going to have to re-listen to the Coffin Train.
Yeah.
My apologies to Diamond Head for not listening to it more, but life is short and there's only so much time.
Right, and they're, like I said, they're one of those bands that gets kind of lost in the archives a little bit when you're going through, especially for somebody like me who has to listen to a lot of stuff for different shows, and I'm just like they get lost in the shuffle a lot.
Yeah, unless I've got a specific reason these days to listen to something new, it's very difficult to make the time for it, which is terrible.
Yeah,
terrible attitude.
And every now and again, I'll be scrolling through my Spotify playlists or whatever, and Diamond Head will jump out at me like, "Yeah, okay, why not?"
Yeah. Cool. Anyway, I'm probably going to have to drop out in a minute, I'm afraid, mate. But
yes, I got to be going as well. But it was great to have you here, and great to finally put some or shed some light on these guys because they are underrated as hell.
I think so. Thanks for doing this. Yeah, it's a
No,
band that you've reignited my interest in them. So I'm going to have to go and dig out some of the digital stuff I've got and listen to it.
absolutely. And,
And
in between that, where can people find you?
they can find me on that 70s Rock Fan channel, where tomorrow I will be having an episode of the Cult Comedy Crew that we do. And I'm going to do, it's all going to be all about the Ruttles, the Prefab Four,
One of the best fake bands ever.
one of the best fake bands ever. And actually the perfect marriage of Python, Saturday Night Live, and the Beatles, because
Pretty
they
much.
were all involved in this. I think I want to talk not only about the music part of it, but the fact that those three culturally significant ensembles actually got together to make this thing called the Ruttles, which is really quite unusual if you think about it. For it's the confluence of the high point of Western culture, if you ask me, and to make
Right.
this lovely little musical parody. So
Yeah, like you say, it's a cultural, like these three cultural icons coming together to make fun of themselves.
that's right. Yeah, so from that perspective, I mean, the show it's going to be talking a lot about that history and that how it came together and just how amazing that is when you look back at it. That well, we've got Python's started and we've got Saturday Night Live people involved, and now George Harrison's there, and
That had to be a weird project for him. It's like, we need songs that sound like you but aren't you.
Well, he was there when Neil Innes was writing a lot of the songs, and he's like, there's one moment in particular where Neil Innes and Eric Idle were sitting around the table saying how they, trying to make some sarcastic or humorous piece work, and George looks up. He says Neil Innes said George was sitting there with his guitar. He didn't write any of this stuff, but he was there, and he looked up and says, we were the Beatles, So like even he thought they were going a bit too far.
Right.
Because they really did take the piss. I particularly love the Ron Nasty, the John Lennon character, when he does his shower for peace thing, whatever.
Yeah.
He's sitting in the shower with Chastity, daughter of a famous German politician from World War II.
Yeah,
she's got the full Nazi uniform on.
That's one of those sequences that, like, even at the time, it's like, the line, look behind you.
I think you just went over the line there. That's right. Yeah. So that kind of thing I want to talk about, because there's some really funny stuff in there, and it helps if you know the Beatles history, which at the time they released it, they didn't really. A lot of people didn't know that story with Hamburg and all that other stuff. So it maybe didn't have as much impact then, but now looking back, they had it nailed.
Yeah, absolutely. Check that show out because that should be a lot of fun. Yeah. And then, as for me, I think this Thursday, I wanted to last Thursday, but stuff came up. We will be covering the new wave of British heavy metal on Thursday at 8. Nice. So hopefully that will be a excellent show.
So, are we going to be talking Angel Witch?
We might indeed be talking Angel Witch.
Tigers of Pantang.
Tigers of Pantang will be on that list.
School.
These guys will be on that list.
Girls School. I've got
Girls School will probably be in there.
I'm trying to think of all the other sort of more obscure acts. Samson were one, obviously. Bruce Dickinson.
Yeah, I don't know that much about Samson, so I'll have to dig into that because I know they were around at the time.
They were part of that scene, but amongst many others, of course. But fun. It was a fun time.
Absolutely. And if you guys want to follow me over there, in about 45 minutes or so, I'm going to be live on Rumble on the Verdant Mint channel for some Starfinder, so you can enjoy us murder hoboing away our merry way around the cosmos.
Splendid.
So that should be some fun. And if you like seeing guys get hit with a ladder, that's one of our weapons of choice. So,
yeah.
So thank you guys for coming out. Hopefully, I hope to see you guys in the near future. And with this all being said, take care, stay safe. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.